it's about you and your child and making sure that they know that you are the primary resource for them in this place. I always tell parents to say to your kids, when they share anything, doesn't matter if it's the worst news or the best news, I am so honored. I'm so grateful that you trust me with this. There is literally nowhere else on the face of the earth I'd rather you go than to me, no matter what it is. That bridges any gaps that can be there in kids' relationship with you. And it means they trust you. And that is the highest compliment for a parent.
You're not alone, you're not alone, you're not alone. You're not alone, you're not alone, you're not alone.
Hello, friends. Welcome to This Whole Life. We are back for another glorious and joyful, hope-filled conversation. At least that's what I am hoping for. I think that's what we'll get. We're really blessed to have not just you, my love, Kenna. How are you doing?
Good. Good morning.
But we also have Dr. Julia Sadusky back with us again. Julia, how are you?
I'm so good. It's good to be with you guys.
Great. You are part of the illustrious community of repeat This Whole Life guests.
Yeah.
So there are not many of them.
I think there's like two.
Yeah. You and Father Nathan and
maybe Vonda.
me. I don't know. Yeah, Vonda. Yeah, there you go. That's right. For those of you who have not listened to our first episode with Dr. Julia Sadusky, don't stop what you're doing. But when you're done here, go back and listen to that one because it's just as good as this one's going to be. Dr. Julia Sadusky is a licensed clinical psychologist and the owner of a private practice in Littleton, Colorado. She's an author, consultant, speaker, adjunct professor. She's done all kind of research and clinical work in sexual and gender development and specializes in trauma-informed care. She got her bachelor's from Ave Maria University and a master's degree and doctorate in clinical psychology from Regent University. And she's written a host of different books, including one that we're going to focus on specifically today, Start Talking to Your Kids About Sex. Dr. Julia Sadusky, welcome back. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Kenna, my dear,
Yeah.
would you mind? So here's the deal. Before we hit record, Julia and I had a moment of honesty
confession.
and realized that neither of us have a high and hard ready, even though we've actually thought about it and we got nothing. So you said you would start us off and we're going to be thinking the whole time. We're going to try to listen as best we can,
That's
but
right,
mostly
but
it's
take
for the
your time
listeners.
with it. Yeah.
And by that, you mean listen to the Holy Spirit telling
Yes,
you
please. That's right.
what you should talk about. Okay, well, admittedly, mine is super easy because I am coming off of a retreat. And so the high and hard within there is, so this retreat center is called Bethany Center for Prayer and Renewal. And it's in Scandia, Minnesota, which is just this sweet, tiny little town. It's set on over 100 acres of farmland. It used to be a tree farm. And some dear friends of ours started this nonprofit and really have this call to help people encounter the Ignatian style of prayer, the Ignatian spiritual exercises, and they lead Ignatian retreats. And so the setting is this farm, which is just so different than most of our urban lives. So that was a high in and of itself. But it's named Bethany after Martha, Mary, and Lazarus. And on the retreat, you have a quote, Martha, someone who just really is there caring for your every bodily need. And I was telling Pat when I got home, like, it's not luxurious in this. You're not eating filet mignon like for every meal. It was actually like quite simple in some ways, but this reality that because we are embodied, that when someone is just caring for and thinking about it and anticipating what we might need physically, it really does like free the soul to go where it needs to go and to go to hard places. And I went to some hard places because my human needs were being so beautifully attended to. So that was the high. The hard is, and it's a good hard, is just how do I bridge that experience back into real life, right? It's not meant to be had in some contained separate space. I was given that gift of retreat for the Lord to show me things about my relationship with him and so that I could like bring it back. And so this is the, first thing Monday morning, there were some hard things I had to tackle. And it was like, okay, like how do I not lose my peace? How do I retain this sense of just really resting in the Trinity and knowing that my Blessed Mother is looking over me. And it's been a challenge, like to come back to real life and all those things. So a little high and hard combo there.
Well, I'm glad you're back in real life.
It's your heart that she was gone.
As she started talking about the retreat, I realized I have my high and hard. That's so funny. Are you ready? Do you want to go?
ready.
Okay.
Oh, she did it. Okay, great. Go for it,
I
Julia.
did it. Yeah. So my high is this past weekend. I was in Milwaukee and I got to visit my best friend and her husband and their several kids, and just really getting to, in some sense, get out of my typical rhythm of life and typical routine and just be with people who knew me long before I did any of the stuff I do now.
Mm-hmm.
When I show up there, I feel like I'm an 18-year-old, right? Hanging out in a college dorm room with my best friend. And that's just really sweet. But also, I'm a huge Eagles fan. And they're, you may know.
We know, Julia.
Yeah, they're doing quite well
We're
this
happy
year.
for you.
They
That's
did quite
terrific.
well last year
Yes,
as well, if you'll
and your
remember.
tush pushes, that's fine. Whatever.
But my friend's oldest children, who I spent a lot of time with when I was in grad school, I really tried to get them to be Eagles fans. And one of them is now a Detroit Lions fan. And I know it's sad for him. Yes. And so when I was leaving this weekend, I just have this memory of him chasing after my car, kind of taunting me for being an Eagles fan. And those are just really sweet moments when you get to be in your friends' kids' lives. So
That's great.
that was my high for sure. I would say one of the hard right now for me is, no surprise to people anywhere, that there's just so much polarization and vitriol right now online. And I stay off of a lot of that, but some of that's been leaking through recently. And there've just been some situations professionally that have also been deeply personal, where people in my life who I love have been really targets of some of that smearing and attack. And so I think I'm kind of working with myself in that to not go into being the rescuer in that situation. But I think just really feeling a lot of heartbreak and a lot of sadness for how dehumanizing we can be towards one another in groups of people who are not all bad, And so anyway, I think I'm holding some of that right now.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Oh, that's brutal. Gosh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Literally just told Kenna the other day, she was talking about some Instagram stuff that we and I could be doing for the podcast and all that. And I took Instagram off my phone again for the 17th time, like 2 weeks ago. And it just feels so good. And like Instagram is not necessarily, it's certainly not all bad. It's not always the main form of real denigrating comments like that. Like Twitter, Reddit, they do a great job, but Instagram is, but it just feels so good to be clear of that when I find myself not being able to relate to it well, Ugh, yeah. Nice green Eagles sweater, by the way. That's great.
Birds.
So glad. Birds. Oh my gosh. So wait, let's back up just 2 seconds. I'm stuck on this. So your friend's kid is a Lions fan in
but lives
Milwaukee,
I
Wisconsin.
thought you were
I
going to say
know.
Packers. I thought you were going to
Seriously?
go Packers.
I know. I
route.
would have thought that myself.
Credit to him for being his own person. That's great. Okay.
I appreciate some good differentiation.
That's
in
right.
kids, yeah.
I hope his friends at school appreciate that too. Yeah. Okay, I'm ready. Kenna, you went on retreat recently. I don't know if you're aware.
I haven't had a whole lot of debrief about that, actually.
Bit of a high and a hard. So the hard is just the obvious hard of like, I don't like it when you're not around. For me personally, I'd rather be with you than not. Number two, it's just harder for any parent to do it alone. I think there's this really genuine both hand that like God made man and woman to be together because that's the way a family is meant to be. And that's no insult or shade at any single parents. On the contrary, I am in awe of single parents.
Yeah.
I can't do it for 3 days, much less for the next 40 years or whatever you have ahead of you. You know what I mean? The single parents who are doing that kind of work on their own and hopefully with a community, but maybe not, are just heroes. So that is also true. But it's just the difficulties of like having to think of everything. And on, when was it? Right before you got home on Sunday night, I remembered again that when one parent is gone, the other parent is the target for every question, every thought, every fight. Normally they walk right past me and they go to mom because I am useless and you're beautiful and they want your help. But now it was just machine gun, dad. And I had it up to here.
So they do know your name.
When you're not around, they remember. Yeah.
Speaking of bridging skills.
Man.
Yes.
So that was hard. The high was that it's, and I was telling you before you left even, there is like the adrenaline rush of like having the big like game test, whatever, a couple days ahead of you and just being like, I got no option but to do it. So like, let's go. Like just getting kind of like psyched up for it and ready. And it was great. The older two kids in particular were super helpful, like they always are. Got some fun time with them in the evenings after the little kids went to bed. We had enough events to kind of like break up the weekend a little bit, that it wasn't just cabin fever constantly. So it was beautiful. It went as well as it possibly could, which is probably not great, but it went as well as it could. So we'll go for it.
We did strategically plan. We were making the menu for While I'd Be Gone, and we did strategically plan a Chick-fil-A lunch. Like, I was like, "There's a playground. You can all eat something delicious between basketball games."
Yep, it was nice. Yeah, it was very nice of you to say we set up the menu. It was very generous of you to include me in that. Yeah,
doing what it can. Doing what it can.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of those darling children, admittedly, Julia, this, like so many of our episodes, is driven by things that we are encountering in our own parenting, right? Like, and we trust that we are united with many parents and caretakers, grandparents, godparents, just adults in children's lives who want to do well by them and to form them well. And one of the books that we often recommend is your book, Start Talking to Your Kids About Sex. And you actually have, it's like a partner series, right? So one is for ages, 0 to 10, would you
that's
say?
about right.
Okay. And then the teens, the adolescents and beyond. And so, yeah, when Pat and I were looking at this year's lineup of podcast topics, we were like, oh my gosh, if Julie could come back and talk to us about these very essential and necessary conversations that somehow we parents do not feel equipped for. So that is just to kind of set the foundation for us today.
Literally last week, a friend of mine came over, a listener to the show. What's up, brother? How are you? And he came over to talk about this exact topic. He's got a bunch of boys that are coming up to be about 9, 10, I think is the oldest. And he was like, we've got the best intentions. We're doing our best, but I don't really know what to do. So I said, we can have a conversation, but boy, do I have an episode for you in a little while here. So
and some books
stay
in the
tuned.
meantime.
That's right.
Yeah. So maybe, Julie, you can just let us in on what experiences of your own, even what conversations, maybe clinically or personally, led you to want to dive into this topic and create this resource for parents.
Yeah, so like all of you, I mean, I think I was really struck as I started walking with parents clinically around how often parents are on their back foot when it comes to anything sexual education related. I mean, I was so aware of how many well-meaning parents wanted to do right by their kids and really wanted to show up in a healthy, ongoing way. And so often they were put in that reactive place where the only time they were having conversations about sexuality was literally when they found their child, stumbling upon pornography or self-stimulating. And so that was one piece of it, was just seeing how reactive our communities have felt as if we needed to be because we didn't have the formation. So that was really integral. And then I had my closest friend reaching out to me very regularly with small children and just saying, hey, how would I respond to this? Or this thing came up. What do you think about this? And she kept saying over and over, I wish somebody would write a book about this. I wish there was a Catholic book about this. And the probably first 4 times she said it, I thought, oh, that would be a really good book idea. And I didn't really think
Somebody
much
really
else
should
about
write
it.
that book.
That's a really good idea. I wish somebody would do that. And then one day she asked something where I did a Google search for information on just early childhood body exploration. And the first result was Planned Parenthood's website. And it was good.
I literally have chills.
Yeah, it was good content on the website about body exploration in small children. And I thought to myself, nobody in my communities is going to go to Planned Parenthood's website. So how are they going to get the information that's available on that page in a way that they can receive in faithfully Catholic, ways? And so that really was impactful. And I was pitching a totally different book at the time to Ave Maria Press. And they delayed kind of reviewing it with their publishers. And so I emailed my editor and I said, hold on, give me 24 hours. I have an idea. And so I wrote a chapter in probably an afternoon.
Wow.
And that was just data
Good
for
golly.
me, right?
Wow.
That there was something in me that wanted to speak to this. And also, I think I was feeling the need so greatly. And that was really how the book came to be. And they parroted back to me, wait a second, why don't you write a book for parents of teens as well? So suddenly I was writing 2 books in a year instead of 1. Yeah.
In an afternoon.
Yeah, that's right.
Careful what you wish for.
Yes, yes.
I remember years ago when I was doing youth ministry, it was in the middle of the crux of the Supreme Court debate around gay marriage and what marriage means in the U.S. And just speaking of polarization, just lots of rhetoric and vitriol from both sides. The church was involved in a lot of healthy ways and in a lot of ways that were probably maybe outside the scope of the church that particular people got involved with, whatever. But we had conversations youth ministry wise about lots of LGBTQ conversations around this time. And I remember the pastor at the time asking me, I think with a little hesitancy about the blowback he might get as the pastor, why do we need to spend a whole night at youth group and confirmation prep about this? And I said to him, because if we don't say anything, they're going to hear really broken things from someone else. You know, there's the one side that villainizes anyone who has any same-sex attraction or gender questions. There's the other side who gives free rein. Anything you want is good, no matter, or anything you choose to do is good, no matter what the objective nature is. So the church has this beautiful place to be somewhere in the middle of holding both of those in tension, you know. And to his credit, he was really, I think, understanding and allowed us to go through with it, and it ended up being really beautiful. But that exact idea, Julia, of having a voice of truth and mercy that gives a really great resource that people don't have to go to Planned Parenthood for what could be some good content in a mountain of really dangerous, horrible content, right? So thank you for saying yes to writing the book and spending 24 hours on a chapter. That's great. I you know, the very first like actual chapter of the book is about the obstacles and struggles that we as parents bring to these conversations. What are some of the most common stumbling blocks for parents, for other caretakers in having these conversations? What stuff are we trying to work through in ourselves even?
Yeah, I think it's a good question for people to ask themselves, right? Is what is happening inside of me when I even imagine approaching this conversation or these conversations in real time that gets in the way? Because I kept, again, seeing how these well-meaning parents wanted to have these conversations. We talk about it in therapy. I coach them and they go home, come back the next week and say, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And so what gets in the way? I think there's some really common barriers that I've heard from people. One being simply not having role models. It's like learning how to drive a car if you've never seen somebody drive a car. Well, you may be very intelligent. You may have a lot of kind of knowledge and understanding, but kind of operationalizing that, it requires really skill building and seeing other people do it well. And so most parents do what they've seen against kind of their better judgment. And I think that was really striking to me. Another piece that we understand as Catholics really deeply is shame, sexual shame, and just the sense of badness that gets paired with sexuality, embodiment. I think certainly there's a lot of talk today about purity culture. And I do think that has had an impact here on just associations made about embodiment, about sexuality, about desire, that really make it hard for parents when push comes to shove. Parents' own sexual histories have another big part to play here. A lot of parents, may remember in early childhood or adolescence harmful experiences, right? Unwanted touch or other things that have happened to them as kids, that then when their kids age at that age, it brings up their own stuff. And if there's not places to go with that, I think that's a challenge as well. And another barrier that gets in the way.
Yeah.
I think in my own, when we've had these kinds of conversations, and oh my gosh, I flubbed so hard. We're not going to go there today, Pat, but because I'm still trying to save face in front of Julia, but
that'll be a separate Storytellers episode someday. And I'm not kidding. That'll be brilliant.
Gosh, it was so bad. But what that taught me is when I approach this topic, either in response to my child's questions or because it's developmentally appropriate and we've decided like it's time to share this information with them, that even naming with my kids, like I feel a little nervous about this because it's so important. Like you said, to kind of sit with what is hard for this about me for me. And I think for myself, I've recognized, and I think for many of my peers, it's because I do understand the gravity of this. Like, it feels like this huge responsibility. And maybe particularly if we think of it as like the conversation only happens once, which is, a pretty erroneous way to approach it. But I think that, did you have the talk? It really does set this up as this one seminal moment that, can never be touched. You got to get it right. And so, to be able to just even name my own with my kid, and to say that what's behind that is that I know how important this is. So in thinking about this, right, if we want to have these cultures of ongoing openness and discussion, I wonder too, if there are like some best practices that you've seen or recommend for families around, I don't know, just guidelines or thoughtfulness around these conversations and around being able to respond to our children's questions.
Yeah, you bring up a really important one where when you say, I'm going to share with my kids what's happening for me as I step into this with them, not only are you modeling for them, right, how to regulate, because naming our emotions itself is regulating for us, but you're also helping your kid connect the dot when they see things on your face or in your tone of voice that so many kids misperceive as a signal that maybe you're not equipped, you're not confident, this is hard for you, so they want to avoid it next time, or that you're irritated or upset about having to have the conversation. And so what you did there, Kenna, right, is you didn't just share what you were feeling, you told them why. And the reason why is because this matters so much to me. So that's how I encourage parents right out the gate is whatever you notice happening. If you're talking fast, if you're wanting to shut down, if you want to avoid it, say that. I find myself wanting to avoid this or not go there with you because this is new territory for me. I'm still learning. And it's so important, and you're so important to me, that I'm going to do the work to show up in this with you. That is so helpful. So then when your kid is being asked, how do you feel about talking to mom or dad, right? Yeah. And that's another key principle is being able to also tune into how is this for your kid? Because some kids are, if they're thinking it, they'll tell you, right? Yeah. and other kids, you wouldn't know what's happening in their mind until you get them in a moment of vulnerability or tiredness. And so there's real differences there. And so being able to check in with your kid and roll with their blocks to sharing is really key. There's two other principles that I think are good for parents to know, just even right out the gate. One would be the shame that comes up when we look back and we recognize we've done it wrong. We've done it maybe not in the ways that we hoped we would. And that's inevitable, right? You spoke to an example of that. There are so many, countless examples of that. And what's really valuable about that is you get to show your kids what to do when they mess up.
Yeah.
And so any parent listening who says, gosh, I mess this up, everything we talk about from here on out, they're going to be vetting and saying, oh, I remember when I did that wrong and that wrong. Use that as a catalyst to go back to your kid. And even if they're 20 years old and say, you know what? Do you remember that time when you were 5? No. Okay. Well, let me tell you what happened. When you were 5, we had this conversation because you were touching your genitalia, and I saw it when you were taking a bath, and out of not knowing how to handle it well, I really messed up. I swatted your hand away. And you said you don't remember that, but I look back on that and I am aware that that was not the best approach. I want to apologize for that. I didn't show up in the way you needed. And I just want to take ownership and let you know that your body is good. And you were doing something that kids naturally do when they're learning about all things, including their body. So I am sorry for that. That is such a huge model for your kids on what to do and not staying in shame. So that's definitely really important here. The last thing I'll say is really this, that anytime you're having these conversations, you cannot gauge the effectiveness of what you're doing off of the response of your child in the moment. That's really important because a lot of parents tell me, listen, I did exactly what you told me to do. And I went and I said the things to my kid and I felt really good about it. And then I said, what do you think of that? And they responded and they said, "Can we eat lunch?"
Yeah, right.
Like, this is boring, you know, or that's weird, right? And
totally.
you just feel like, but taking a long-term view, it is important to model the skill. It is important to give the information. Giving your kid time to process that over decades, that's really the role of parenting. It's not that cause-effect immediate gratification that I did well because you responded and told me how awesome I did it, right? So that's why we need other parents and kind of therapists to help us stay anchored in the reality of the important things that we're trying to do.
Yeah.
There's nothing funnier to me than going back to our episode with Matt Burke, and speaking of football, there's nothing funnier to me than the day after the NFL draft when they will grade the draft of each NFL team. The next day, 0 of these players
They've
have
even taken
put
to the
on-
field.
They haven't practiced for that team yet, much less played in a game. So they're grading the potential of the players that have been drafted, matching up with the needs of the team, blah, blah, blah. You need to do that grade 5 years later, right? Like
Yes.
that long-term view is so crucial for, I mean, forget the NFL. It's a silly example, but in parenting, especially, like, we want the immediate gratification of like, oh, thank God, I didn't screw this up too bad. And it's a decades long play, you know?
Yeah, I mean, so much of parenting is planting those seeds and then having the distress tolerance to like wait it out to see like what fruit is born or where do I need to adjust course or, you know, come back or what needs to be bolstered or edited. So, yeah.
Something you brought up, it made me think of, we did a whole series on sex a little while ago, and Vonda, another one of our multi-episode guests, she's a LMFT as well. She brought up that, you know, in a lot of ways, we as Christians in particular, we can fall into the trap that the culture presents, which is not giving sex the value that it innately has. So denigrating sex, degrading it to mere pleasure or something like that. So we as Christians, we can fall in that trap sometimes. But the other way that we can fail is by giving sex way more power than it deserves. What I'm hearing when you talk about kind of the hangups for us parents, Julia, is the thing in us that says, and you hinted at it too, Kenna, this is the thing. This is the thing that will make my child happy or miserable for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if there's a way that, not to tell parents to not take it seriously, that's not what I'm suggesting, but maybe to like put it in its rightful place of like, yes, this is important. It is not the only thing. So take a breath, right? Yeah. Is there something there?
Yeah, I think the big piece within that is we've been taught kind of in parenting a lot of the times with all the parenting books and the self-help phenomenon that there's a way to guarantee certain outcomes in our children.
Sure.
And I wish that were true. You know, I would love that. And it's not true. You have these kind of infinitely complex human beings before you. Yeah. And if you're a parent, you know every single kid is different, and something that works for one will not work guaranteed for the next, right? And so you constantly feel like you're a new parent on some level at each stage. And so I think normalizing that for parents, helping parents expect that level of novelty and see it more as an adventure. Like instead of, as you said, Pat, you know, every conversation I have to do it right and I can't mess up and there's no take backs and all of that. What if I think of this as kind of we're hiking for a long time and like I'm going to step in crap along the way. Like, you know, there's going to be sunrise and that's going to be beautiful and it might rain right around lunchtime and you know, wash us out. Like there's going to be a lot along the way that's going to really challenge me. And so then when I'm sitting down with my kid, there's a level of flexibility there. Like, let's see where this goes. And there's certain concepts that you want to introduce at certain ages. I talk about that in the book. And as soon as you hit that, which can take less than a minute a lot of the time, where you teach the skill or you teach the fact, everything else is all bets are off. It's kind of, you've done that work. Now you get to connect with your child, which you know how to do, right? And so just bringing it back to connection, bringing it back to relationship, and setting yourself up as a parent to do it at a time when you're calm enough. And when you're not staring at each other, sitting across from each other, right? Like driving in the car, walking around the neighborhood, these times where you're doing something, doing the dishes, where you don't have to be in a stare down.
Yeah, the intensity of that. It's also, as you describe that, it's making me realize that, especially when you said like the actual delivery of the content, right? If we're looking at developmental appropriateness of what we're teaching our children in terms of like sex education wise, is actually, it's pretty small, but it sits in this much broader context of the relationship and modeling for our children what it means, this incarnational like theology that we believe in. Pat and I used to give the theology of the body talks for the Archdiocese for engaged retreats. And one of the things we talked about is like from the moment that our children entered our lives, we were teaching them about sex. I mean, just by the ways that we relate to our body, the ways we speak about our body, like there's so much that goes into forming our children around sex. That's not just the formal conversation or even the 1 minute soundbite of, okay, great, check that, off of Julia's list. And so, yeah, if you just want to say more, especially as I see her, I'm like, encourage us, Julia, about how we can see this a bit more integrated, a bit more full picture in living color.
Yeah. So a lot of people, when they think about all of those moments that you're describing from, how I talk about my body in front of kids in my life, or how I relate to their body as kind of, let's say they're 3, 4, 5, and they're learning to kind of be aware of their body and label it and all of those things, it can actually feel very overwhelming for people. You mean I can't just do it once?
Yeah.
And kind of power through that sex talk.
Just grit my teeth for 10 minutes and be done. Yeah.
Right. Because when I have the book, Start Talking to Your Kids About Sex, and it's for parents of kids 0 to 9. And parents will say, oh, I don't need to read that book yet because I don't have teens. Well, that tells you something, right? And so I think for parents to remember that actually the gradual nature of what we're talking about here takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
Because you have to maybe 50% of the time do it okay, right? I mean, and you've got so many chances. So when your child is 2 or 3 and, they're learning about their bodies, and the skill is you're teaching them accurate terms for genitalia, you get to do that like 20 times over the course of that period, right?
Yeah.
Changing diapers, giving a bath, and just labeling. And that's so helpful because it's just it's kind of, there are so many chances when it comes to responding to kids, who are touching their body or genitalia and playing with it in ways, being able to say to kids over and over, like you would if they were throwing food on the floor, right? That actually food stays on the table. Food's for eating, not for playing. Food's not a toy. Your genitalia, I see you, grabbing your penis and playing with it. Our penis has such an important job. And actually, it's not a toy to be played with. We got to keep it clean. So we wash our hands and we don't put our hands there because they've got germs on them, right? And the more you say that over and over again, you can be way cooler and calmer than you would expect when you take a long-term view. And I've heard this from parents after they've read the first book and they've read the second book and they've got some teens or preteens, when they get to the sexual intercourse talk, they say to me, it is the easiest conversation ever because it's just putting all of these pieces they've been building together. And I think that's really important and can be a source of ease. The other piece of it is what you described, Kenna. It's about you and your child and making sure that they know that you are the primary resource for them in this place. I always tell parents to say to your kids, when they share anything, doesn't matter if it's the worst news or the best news, I am so honored. I'm so grateful that you trust me with this. There is literally nowhere else on the face of the earth I'd rather you go than to me, no matter what it is. That bridges any gaps that can be there in kids' relationship with you. And it means they trust you. And that is the highest compliment for a parent.
There are like scary statistics that I won't list because I don't know the exact numbers of the percentages of kids that when they have a question about something deeply personal, especially sexual, the number of kids who go to their parents, which is a small and decreasing number, compared to kids who will go to their friends, go to Google, or of course now ChatGPT, that they will just go to a thing for an answer about themselves and the world around them instead of their parents. And it's such a great reminder to me as a parent to just thank my children for trusting me with them and their stories and their friendships and their questions. And I love that stuff. And I'm glad that they, at least to this point, have comfort coming to us about things like that.
Can I circle back on something that you said, Julia, that I think is really important? And there's a bit of like personal conviction in it, but it's also this reality that I've seen it in my friends, in my social circles. But really specifically, you said a minute ago, when you see your child playing with their genitalia, you said it has an important job. Our hands have germs, and so we want to keep it clean and healthy for its important job. What you didn't say, and what I have fallen into, and this is a good correction, you didn't say your genitalia has germs, and we want to keep everything else free of its inherent dirtiness.
Sure.
Which, like, truly from a bacterial perspective, I am like, please don't pick your butt, because there's like, I've seen the way you wipe.
Yeah,
You don't wipe, and it's not great. Okay.
That's right.
But I think what the process, what you're really communicating is the importance of this, like is the specialness, the sacredness, that it was created with a purpose, that the Lord had something in mind for your genitalia when he created it. And so I just want to underscore that, because that is not a small shift, or what it conveys is actually a whole new paradigm of how to think about this, and how to go, not a source of shame, not a, I'm covering my genitalia, like not a, for those of you just listening,
Not a fig leaf. Yeah.
But like, oh man, we've got to really take care of it. And so therefore we're not going to treat it like a toy. So just had to circle back on
that's
that.
right.
Sorry, Pat, if you had another question.
No, it's all good. I do, but that's great. Yeah.
Okay.
And it gave me a chance to say fig leaf, which was on my bingo card for the episode.
You've been waiting for that moment today.
So we have occasionally gotten questions. We've had to talk through situations ourselves of when we're talking about younger children in particular, right? So under the age of 10, when they come up against kind of your classic hot button 21st century questions around gender and sexuality, right? So kid comes home from school and they say, hey, my classmate has 2 dads. Can 2 boys get married? Or they go to the library or a coffee shop and there is a person who is serving them who is kind of ambiguously gender identified, and they have questions about is that a boy or a girl, right? What do we do?
Yes, these are the moments that parents just get so consumed with fear and protectiveness.
Yeah.
And so if somebody's listening and they feel protective of their kids, it's a really healthy impulse. I want to shape this. I want to help with this. Now, the challenge with fear is when we parent from our fear, right? We don't always look back on that moment with gratitude and pride, right? And so,
not my best work.
Yeah, that's right. I do it differently now, right? And so just bringing that kind of levity to it, that these are moments where you're going to feel afraid. And you might feel angry. Like, I wasn't ready for that on my Tuesday, and now I got to talk about it. But we're going to reframe that maybe together and say, wow, this is a teachable moment. This is where you get to shape how your child encounters people in the real world. What a gift. That's what parenting is really about, right? Giving somebody an interpretive lens. So what do we want that lens to be? I think that's the right question. And so let's predict those moments. Let's forecast them. Let's take the example of you have a kid who is going to school and they have a peer who has 2 dads. And they come home and they say, Mom and Dad, you always say that marriage is between a man and a woman, but you're not right because my friend has 2 dads. Well, there's a lot of ways you could respond to that, right? What I recommend in the book is something like this, saying to a kid, oh, I'm so glad that we can talk about your friends at school. What's your friend's name? What does that do? Well, it buys you a little bit of time. and it also shows I care about you. I want you to talk with me about the people in your life. And this is not about gay marriage as a kind of construct up here. This is about helping my child be in relationships in the world in sustainable ways as a Catholic, right? And so I care about my child and their friend. Then I might say something like, tell me a little bit about your friend and tell me what else you know about your friend's 2 dads. And then I might say, you know, as Catholics, you're right. We do have a sense of marriage that's pretty different from the broader culture. So in the broader culture, there are people that you'll meet who are in these kind of lifelong committed relationships between people of the same sex. It sounds like your friends' dads are in that situation. And when we bump up against that, a good way of thinking about that is they didn't actually maybe learn what we know about marriage. That marriage isn't merely agreement between people, that marriage is something that reveals something important about who God is and who we are. And so a lot of people haven't been taught that. And so maybe your friends' parents never got that kind of really deep understanding we have as Catholics. And let me tell you what we're going to do about that. Anytime in the world you meet somebody and something in their life is not quite God's best for them, you get to know that person, you get to love on that person, you get to be friends with people who are in those places. You may have your own places that you're kind of not where God would have you be. Mm-hmm. And we can hold that we have a clear understanding of what God's best is and be in relationships with people like your friends. And I would love to meet your friends' dads at some point. I hope we get to. Mm-hmm. That's really what we're going for there in that conversation.
And I know all parents were just writing a script for themselves, right? Because that was amazing. That was brilliant. And most of us were like, blah, blah.
Yeah. So remember, the key principle is not so much getting the words right, although the book literally gives you scripts. So that's on purpose.
Saw that. Yep.
That's there. But to really anchor in relationship. I don't have to have it right. So many parents in that moment would say, yeah, well, they're wrong about marriage, right? Or I don't know if I want you talking to your friends, like going over to their house or something like that out of fear. If you do that, that's great because you can teach them what to do when we do things out of fear. And you can circle back 2 days later and say, hey, did you notice that mom was really talking fast or dad was really interrupting you in that last week? I just want to circle back and say, I really do. I want to meet your friends' dads. I'd love to get to know them better. Would love to have your friend over our house. Because even while we do have different beliefs, it sounds like, about marriage, there's a lot we can learn from people who don't know everything about everything, just like we don't know everything about everything.
Yeah. And I think too, you're really showing us when we step in the muck and we as parents look in that rearview mirror and we're like, oh man, that was not my best self. And it is often fear. And I hope that for myself, I'm asking for the grace for the future that in those moments, I won't shame and blame myself, but I can have a little bit of self-compassion of like, it makes sense because I was caught on my back foot, I was caught off guard, and I didn't feel equipped. I knew it was important, all those things. The other thing that I have found with our older kids as they continue to, share things with us, and it kind of reveals maybe things they're being taught. Our kids go to a Catholic school, and so it reveals things are being taught. And I want to plant the seed now, as you said, Julia, of like, you too may have some moments where what the church teaches and how you're living your life are not congruent. And I'm already hopefully templating for them, like, and I still want you to come to me. Like, I still want to be in relationship with you. I still want to be connected to you. And it's hard. And it's hard to think of when your kid is 7, 8, 9, 10, even 12, especially if you've got any firstborn rule followers out there. But this reality of like, I know what it was like to have to find my way and fumble in the dark for a while. And even though someone really wanted to, hold a light out for me, and I know what I would have wished, like I believed, all along. And so how can we, plant those seeds again? Long-term plays, guys.
We've talked about that with our kids in a bunch of different ways, but most recently with our oldest child, I had a conversation with her, just laying out the details about pornography, like what it is, how to recognize it, what to do if you come across it, things like that. So she had heard the word, but didn't really know what it meant. So I walked through this a little bit. And one of the things that we have talked about is, like, you brought up the idea of anger, Julia, of like, I had a lovely Tuesday evening planned, and now there's this at dinner.
Yes.
So like that, but
So
I think
honest.
beneath that anger maybe is like, the world is opposed to my kids thriving, and the world is a threat to my kids. And there's a way to take that too far, that everything is a threat and there's like constant vigilance. But I think there is some truth there that like in a fallen world, the devil's out to get us, and the devil is constantly tempting, constantly active. So it is worthwhile to at least live in reality and come to terms with the idea that our kids are going to confront sin and hardship and their own suffering in their sexuality at some point. And the way it looked in that conversation was I told her, like, you will come across this someday.
That's right.
And her first reaction was, no.
Very appropriate
like
reaction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it wasn't, because Kenna and I have had to come to terms with that too. Like, I think early on in our marriage, with my own history, with the stuff we've had to navigate, there was this fear of like, well, my job is to make sure they never, ever come across pornography. And by all means, like, parents ought to do the best they can to delay exposure as long as possible. But at some point, they're going to leave our house. They're going to go to college. They're going to have their own family. It's not a question of if, it's a matter of when. So when you come across this, what are the things that I want to just seeds that I want to plant of how you can respond, how you can react? And it was, I think once we got over her initial revulsion, I think she eventually got some of the principles that we're going for. But it is that, again, it's like that interior work for us as parents. Like, it's, my job is not to shelter you forever. My job is to prepare you for when things don't go as planned.
That's so important. Yeah, thanks for saying that, because that's even part of the spirit of bringing in conversations defining pornography for kids in 8, 9, 10 range, because they haven't been exposed to it usually then. So their reaction to it is actually quite ordered, right?
Yeah, right.
It's the reaction is, oh. And so you can say to them, you know what, that is a totally appropriate thing, because if somebody was, engaging in activity, sexual activity in the other room naked, it would be really odd for us to go watch it, right? Yeah. That sexual intimacy is just not entertainment. So I love that you know that, right? I love that you know that. It's when kids get exposed to pornography, which is very often traumatizing for people, because nobody's asking for this. It's happening to you as an early adolescent or young adult. Most of the time, they're kind of stumbling into something and having all kinds of complex emotions about it, and they don't know what to do with it. And what protects our kids most from things that can traumatize them is that we allow it to be the kinds of things that they can cope with. Well, how do they cope with impossible situations?
Right.
You give them a map, right? You say, here's what you're going to do with that. Really confusing reality when you stumble upon it. And even if they never, in the event that they're one of the very few who never gets exposed to pornography, that gives a roadmap for many different experiences they are going to encounter. And the anger is the response to injustice, right? So when you say there's a lot out there that's trying to target our children, that's true. So use the anger, channel the anger towards protectiveness, towards proactivity, right? And giving that roadmap with a kind of perseverance and persistence, knowing there is an inevitability to fallenness in the world that we live in.
That fallenness kind of leads to, I think, a good place to start to kind of put a pin in this a little bit for now. And it's the idea of hope, that in a fallen world and in lots of difficult conversations, what hope would you give parents that you've already said a lot, but you can do this. It is possible. There is great progress to be made in not just in your child's chastity and modesty, which is all well and good, but in your relationship with them as well. What kind of like stories of hope or a vision for joy in the future do you have for us?
Yeah, it's been so cool to hear parents' journeys as they're reading these resources and as they're talking about it with friends. And the first kind of hope that I would offer to parents is this all starts with you, right? As parents becoming more whole. The parent who gets to step into these spaces and does with courage and fear is a parent who is being shaped in virtue by Christ. And so something is happening in people. I'm hearing as they do this work with their kids, it's healing things in them that they didn't know they needed healing around. When I teach my kids that their genitalia itself is not dirty, right? I'm encountering that in a new way. It's coming alive in me. And so I think being able to remember that this is transforming you. in a way that lets you show up in your relationships and in the world in a more Christ-like way. And then with kids, parents are saying again that as they do this, parents who said, I had the worst sex education, or my gym teacher was the only one who ever said anything about sex,
Yeah.
right? Or I was harmed as a kid in these areas, and I just could not get through that, are saying to me, I had 6 conversations in the last 2 months, and they went pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I think anytime you write something on this, and as I wrote these books, I thought, I really hope this helps people, right? Like a true therapist. I really hope this helps people. And I think I was so struck as I started to hear from parents that really just giving some framework, some scripting, you can take that and run with it. And I'm learning from parents who are coming back to me. They're saying, well, you didn't answer this question, but this came up and here's how we handled it, right? Yeah. And so just, I think the Holy Spirit is with us at particularly this moment in history, wants to equip us so that our churches can be havens for sanctification in the reality of our sexual lives, not in spite of our sexual lives or a kind of pushing those things away.
Yeah, which is really inviting us into greater integration, greater wholeness. Yeah. Yeah. So within all of this, Julia, is there one challenge by choice we can kind of extract here to consider, again, particularly as parents, grandparents, caregivers listen, that they can take this into everyday life?
Yeah. So the thing I'm going to offer is a bit of a reflection moment for this week for parents, is maybe setting aside 5 minutes when you first wake up or before you go to bed, or if you can swing by an adoration chapel or before Mass on Sunday, to just call to mind the one word that captures your experience of sexual education as a kid. What was the one word that captures what you received from parents, social media, peers, whatever it was for you about sex? And I hear all kinds of things from parents, non-existent or gross or bad or good, but not for you, all kinds of messages. So what was that word that captures the message you got? And then think aspirationally, what is the one word? If my children do this exercise in 20 years, what is the word I want them to be able to call to mind when they think back on their experience with me as a parent in sexual formation? Maybe parents say beautiful, a gift, special, important, God-given, to glorify God, all kinds of things. But what's the aspiration? And set your hope on moving towards that. Call it to mind as an anchor for you as you step into these conversations. And I think that can be a real orienting light, and to trust that some of the formation you get and the discernment that you're going to do ongoingly is going to carry you through this challenging space.
Well, and I love that challenge choice. My mind is already thinking about my words, but I love that. And then this opportunity that spouses can have, right, co-parents, and particularly if you aren't married, living together anymore, even more so, to be able to have this conversation of how can we align, our vision and our aspirations, as you said, and feel less alone, feel less on an island bearing this huge responsibility. So I love that. Thank you, Julia.
Shall we pray, ladies?
Let's do it.
The Lord knows we need the grace. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Come, Holy Spirit, be with us and guide us. Speak truth to our hearts, Lord, that we can know what is real and true about the world around us and what is real and true within each of us. Lord, remind us of the beauty that you have created us as, the beauty that you call us to. Lord, help us to be always aware of the beauty of our children, of the goodness that you have placed within them, in their bodies and their souls, and the goodness that you desire for them in the world that is so often fallen and broken and confusing to them and to us. Lord, please heal the spaces where we have made mistakes in the past, mistakes in our own sexuality, mistakes in parenting our children in this way. Lord, we know and we trust that you can make us whole. And please lead us, Lord, in joy and peace to greater conversations, to greater connection with you, greater connection to our children so that they can know more fully your plan of love and mercy for them, and that they can live out that plan in their own lives. Lord, please bless our children. Help them to love you. Help them to be united to you in this life and perfectly united to you in the next. We ask all this, Jesus, in your name. Amen.
Amen.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Dr. Julia Sadusky, God bless you. Thanks so much for being with us again. Where can people keep up with you and find out more about what you're up to, what you're writing, random chapters at a time, anything like that?
That's right. So my website is juliasadusky.com. That's an easy way to keep in touch. I have a newsletter that goes out monthly that can keep people updated on upcoming resources or just what I'm doing these days with writing and speaking. And so that's another great option. And then social media platforms and YouTube are places I'm trying to put out some original video content. So that as well.
Great. Well, we will keep track of you there. Thanks so much for being with us. Friends, you can follow us online at thiswholelifepodcast.com. You can follow us on Instagram, which will be apparently more Kenna than me, but I'll try to dive in when I can at This Whole Life Podcast. You can follow us on Facebook as well. Check us out on YouTube. Search for This Whole Life Podcast, and you can let us know feedback through text or email or all the different ways about what you think about this episode. And until next time, God willing, Dr. Julia Sadusky. Great to see you. God bless you, friends.
You're not alone, you're not alone, you're not alone.
This Whole Life is a production of the Martin Center for Integration. Visit us online at thiswholelifepodcast.com.